All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining. This is another event in the Careers for History majors. We've been covering a few topics. We've talked about graduate school, and we've talked about national and state parks, and we did a session for future history teachers. And today we're going to talk about museums, museum studies, and some related matters. And we have a really wonderful group assembled, a nice group of students, some names that I recognize, but also colleagues and folks from the area that I've gotten to know over the years. My colleague here in the history department, Dr. Daisy Ocampo Diaz, Associate Professor of History here at CSUSB, is joining us. And she's also affiliated with our Museum Studies Certificate Program. So folks can ask about that and also learn about her recent, very exciting work in the Fire Kinships exhibit. We're going to have one of her former students, Lena Tejeda, is going to be reviewing that actually for the journal this year. So I'm excited about that. And in addition to Lena, Michael Chavez was also a team member on that project. And Michael Chavez, who is our a NAGPRA program manager at CSUSB. That's the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act program manager here at CSUSB. So another colleague and also a graduate of our BA and MA program here at CSUSB. It's wonderful to have you join us. And also Jennifer Dickerson, who is currently curatorial services manager for the Museum of Riverside. And we'll be sharing some links for everybody in the chat, so please keep up with those and click through and learn more. Jennifer shared the Museum of Riverside website, and I'll be looking to share a few more links. Michael also shared some links, and I've shared Professor Ocampo Diaz's faculty profile. Okay, I'm going to pass it off to our experts to join. If all three of them should be co-hosts now and able to jump into the conversation. Daisy, do you want to get started and say hello and then pass off to Jennifer and then to Michael?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. A little bit of a cold, so I apologize. Let's see. So I'm Associate Professor of History at Cal State San Bernardino. I'm the coordinator for the Public History program, and also the Museum Studies certificate here within our campus. And within that, there are part of the certificate is inclusive of an internship. And so part of that is me assisting students and identifying an internship. And then part of my work is also to stay active within this field. I've recently curated an exhibit at the UCLA Fowler with Michael here as well. It's called Fire Kinship and Southern California Art and Ecology. And it was essentially looking at the role of Native American, but specifically California Indians in Southern California's cultural burn, so fire stewardship practices. As they relate to our current California wildfires and just looking at that history of fire suppression. And so I could share a little bit more about that later, but I could turn it over if that's okay to the next person to introduce themselves, and then we can kind of go from there. I think your audio is off, Jennifer. Yeah.
Okay, can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. We use Teams for the city, so sometimes if I switch to Zoom, it doesn't like when I switch platforms, so sorry. Thank you. Hi, I'm Jennifer Dickerson. I am the Curatorial Services Manager for the Museum of Riverside. I have been working in the museum field for over 16 years now. I love what I do, and so things like this make me really happy. So thank you, Jeremy, for reaching out. Um, I am not a public historian. I actually got my BA in classical civilizations from UCLA and my master's in history from Cal State Fullerton, and somehow found myself working in museums. That wasn't the intent, but I love it and I'm glad I found that path. I used to work for the Mission Inn Museum and Foundation in Riverside. Then I worked for San Bernardino County Museum for 9 years. And now I've been with the Museum of Riverside for 2 years now. So just loving museums and am definitely a museum and history nerd. So
Well, hello everybody. Thank you, Dr. Murray, for organizing this and having this here. It's always great to be able to speak to students, and definitely plenty of times I wish that I still was a student because it's still a really exciting time in your life. Not saying that this is not an exciting time, but to be a student to have so many possibilities open to you, that's just really a really cool place to be. I'm a double alum of Cal State San Bernardino. Have my BA in history, specifically the public and oral history track here at Cal State San Bernardino, and then came back as part of the first cohort in the history program through the MA program here at Cal State San Bernardino, being led by Dr. Murray, Dr. Ryan Keating, Dr. Diana Johnson, all those folks. And I really cannot speak highly enough of the current faculty makeup, especially in the history department, that we have professors like Dr. Murray, Dr. Ocampo, Dr. Long, especially Dr. Ocampo and Dr. Long. If you're really thinking about museum studies, those are your folks to really to get in with, to talk with, and they're really going to put you in contact with some amazing folks. After graduating from Cal State San Bernardino in 2019, went or 2022 with my master's, went over to UCLA and started as the archaeological collections manager and NAGPRA project manager there at the Fowler Museum, and had some opportunities to work in the museum, and that's when we got the opportunity to bring in Dr. Ocampo. So definitely we worked on it together, but that saying we were both on the project together. Dr. Ocampo and Lena were the heavyweights of the show, lifting the load and really pulling off what ended up becoming a beautiful, beautiful show that ran for a full calendar year, which is pretty incredible as well in its own right. So all the kudos to them. I had the opportunity to come back closer to campus and return to my home campus. I'm not far away, so going to UCLA was a big stretch. And coming back here was definitely something I was excited to. It's a campus that, I'm very proud of, familiar with, and definitely felt like in this line of work that I do, being from a Native community as well, it just felt like a lot of things were lining up. I come back to the campus, that's my home campus, to do work that helps return materials back to my ancestral relations, if not specifically to the folks that I come from, to those relations and neighboring communities that we would have lived alongside with. So a lot of good stuff about coming back to Cal State.
Thanks, everybody. And as Michael noted, I am very much in a sort of coordinator mode here because Professor Ocampo Diaz and Professor Long are the real leads in terms of public and oral history, things like internships, relations to organizations like Jennifer's and other regional museums. So as Michael found coming through the program, Professor Ocampo Diaz and Professor Long are real valuable assets to you in terms of understanding how to navigate this world. One reason I put the series together is to save students time and anguish, reinventing the wheel or not knowing the lay of the land in terms of some of the real fundamentals of getting into this field. And so by way of sort of introduction, that's where maybe I want to ask Daisy and Jennifer and Michael to talk a little bit about sort of the theme I often ask in this series is what I wish I'd known. So how would I have saved myself a lot of anguish? And some of our students, unlike Jennifer, are thinking already very early about this field. And so you may already be in a position where you can talk to Professor Ocampo Diaz, Professor Long, about finding an internship, finding a situation where you get your foot in the door. Um, so along that theme of how students can, in your experience, you've seen students come through and really thrive in this kind of programs, and then going like Michael into thriving careers. Um, what are a few things you might, just a sort of open question, what are a few things you might say to students who are interested in this field, um, in terms of how they position themselves for success, for taking their best early steps, and then a long-term success within the field of museum studies and related fields?
Well, I can speak, at least if anybody is interested in specifically working in museums. Um, since this was not my intended path, I did not get the experience to be an intern or a volunteer. Um, I just happened to start working for a museum and I was very lucky. The museum field is very niche. And I think one thing that unfortunately, when students graduate, they don't always realize how niche museum field is, and so opportunities can be limited. But what you can do to help yourself is volunteer and get those internships. If you can get an internship, you're getting credit and experience all at the same time, so I think those are the best ways to go about it. I know my all the museums I've worked for have benefited greatly from interns and volunteers alike. So even if you're not necessarily getting a structured internship and you just want to volunteer, that is still experience that you can utilize for your future career path. And also networking. Just think about it in that way too, and having references. I didn't have that bank of references when I was moving up or applying to places. So I think those are both really key takeaways that I would suggest. And just if you're a history nerd, you get to work with cool stuff. So
Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was actually just gonna double down on everything that Jennifer was saying. Like, I'd highly encourage you right now as students, if you have any desire, even if you're not even sure if you have desire, take the opportunity to volunteer. Spend some time at the museum, ask how you can support, express that you're a student, you're looking into this as a potential career field, and you'd like the opportunity to support the museum in a volunteer capacity as you figured this out. And you'll get a lot of great experience, whether that's hands-on and like exhibit design and as you're working to do installs. I mean, museums are always short of hands and they could always use more hands. And they're also short of funds a lot of times. So what they could use is free hands. And so volunteer hands are fantastic. They'll happily, readily accept your volunteer hands and your time. You get to learn some really cool skills, skills that are, by the way, transferable not just to that place that you're learning at, but you could take that to other museums. You have experience in that. You can talk about, learning how to be a docent there, so you can provide tours for folks and see if that's something you really like in terms of that lends itself to like exhibit development too, as you're talking about like how would this exhibit want to flow, and you get that experience of watching people maybe some missteps in development where you say like I remember that show. This didn't work so well. So the next time I have an opportunity to have some input, I have real life experience. I could say like, no, I know that this doesn't always work so well. When you get out into, I know a lot of people throw this phrase around the real world when you're not necessarily a student, when you're at work all the time, and that's what you're doing. It's so much harder to find the time to volunteer, to have free time to do something and pursue something that you're passionate about. So I would highly encourage you right now as students, as Jennifer was saying, you can get credit as a student. So you're already making the time to be in school. You should, maximize that by finding really creative ways to get into internships. I had a great internship at the March Airfield Museum down in Riverside, and also a huge history nerd. So not only was it cool to be like in installs and doing like exhibit design and development with the former director Jeff Houlihan who was there, but also like to be in the collection space and get to see a lot of materials and like Those are all like, more contemporary historical materials, but it's like that's still really cool. You get to see uniforms and things of that nature, and you learn how to handle those materials as well. So you get a lot of experience in like the collections management. You learn how to manage the spaces for pests. There's so many things that you can learn, within the museum field that are really niche, but then give you just such a wide array of transferable skills to anywhere in the museum field that you'd really like to pursue.
Thank you, Michael. Um, I was trying to jot down some notes. So I am not necessarily a museum professional, but I do my best to do a lot of the student training um, to get students set up. And I think, given also my recent curatorial project with Fire Kinship, I would say I was trying to think of the role of content and uh, placing yourself to be somewhat of a content expert in whatever museum space that you would like to intern in. So if you decide to do an internship at the Autry or at the Mission and Museum, right? Like really familiarize yourself with that research. And I always like to encourage my students to have alignment with their courses. So if there's like a very open research paper to do in our program, I like to really encourage students to, as they're thinking about an internship and looking at, right, what kind of research areas they focus on or regions that they focus on, that they really try and align, right, a research paper towards that space. That way, they're starting to immerse themselves with the content. I'm thinking one of the first museums that I helped exhibits that I helped curate was at the Autry. And funny enough, I didn't go knocking on the Autry's doors, that I was involved with the Native American Land Conservancy because a lot of my research is on sacred site preservation. And right, and a lot of museums are extremely collaborative with community engagement. And I think Jennifer and Michael can attest to this. Whatever field or area of study that you're interested in, really involving yourself with community partnerships, I think is a really great asset to bring all these different perspectives and voices into exhibits, I think is very important. I think Michael and I can share that when it comes to uh, exhibits dedicated to Native American communities and histories, right? This is a very much changing landscape, and he could share a little bit more on NAGPRA and how that is changing the curatorial process and the importance of community engagement, not just in an ethical way, but also like legally and compliance, right? These are things that are changing how we display. It's changing how we work with communities and questions of consent and compliance. That's all very important. And I would say something that I wish students knew is just how many different jobs are at museums besides being a curator. If I was to do my life over, and kind of still be in the museum world, it would be conservation science. It is just a really fascinating field of, being able to conserve and repair a lot of historical material. And it's at the biological level, right? So you really need to understand the science of different material and glue and how to stitch, but not just like DIY YouTube stitch, but really extend that authenticity to the caretaking of a lot of material and even working with communities to engage them in that process again. So that's an even smaller field, but it's so interesting because I think we don't amplify enough. And there are a lot of museum professionals that are not always very visible. And I think the conservation team are usually very much hidden, so to say. So I would say just really widen your lens. There's the exhibit and design person, the developer person. There's the curator, right? There's so many people involved. Um, and so I'll just kind of yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
Thanks, Daisy. And I do want to come back to Michael on the NAGPRA question, because I think that will be interesting for students to hear. One thing that came up in a few of the remarks was the specificity and the importance of good recommendations. I think those are sort of related, and it comes up for students who have logged on to other events in this series, the importance of just this simple term fit, um, where we have this idea of, or I remember when I was an undergrad, rather, I had this idea of trying to go for a job and being just absolutely as, you just want to be hot stuff and you want to be the one sort of standout candidate that they say, oh yeah, that's the one. But I think, of course, you want to excel in your classes. Of course, you want to have a strong GPA. Of course, you want all these sort of strong aspects of your background. But the the fit question is very, very important, because if you walk into an interview and you demonstrate no understanding of the institution that you're applying to, or if you demonstrate a really poor understanding of it, I think that's going to be a real problem, even if you are, you know, a very, very strong, seemingly very brilliant candidate as a sort of freestanding entity. So I think that's very important. And it also works on this question of recommendations, because we're talking about Professor Ocampo Diaz and Professor Long and getting to know your faculty. Um, that's very, very important. And I would just say to students, office hours, get to know your faculty, because when it comes time for that letter of recommendation, and I know I do dozens of them every year, when I hear from a student who I've seen in office hours, who I know it goes the extra mile in all of their work, that's a very easy 2 or 3 page letter that I can write. But if it's a student who, even if they took multiple classes with me, if I never saw them in my office hours, if they never showed that level of engagement with the course content, that's going to be a pretty short letter. And although it may be favorable and positive, I think that when an employer sees a very short letter recommendation, that's an issue. So what you can do in order to thrive in this way is really, go see your faculty, especially when they're people like Professor Ocampo Diaz, Professor Long, who have these kind of connections. You want to understand what they're doing, what they get excited about, and make those connections. On that note, are there any other sort of do's and don'ts um, in terms of getting into this field? Are there certain organizations, nationwide or local or regional or statewide, that they should be plugged into? And this is a bit of a transition to understanding NAGPRA. So maybe Michael, you can start us on this one. But if Daisy and Jennifer want to also flag any other sort of museum organizations, professional organizations that they should be aware of. Maybe they can hop into an open conference that's in Los Angeles or Riverside or something like that. If there's a museum workers conference or something like that, that they should be tuned into and understand some of the basic best practices, maybe subscribe to a journal, those kind of things. But let's start with NAGPRA and go back to Michael. If you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Definitely. So first off, NAGPRA is if museum work is niche, the NAGPRA work is like the flea on top of the little mouse that is niche museum like focus. Like it is a very specific focus within museum fields. You find it now because of the changes in both federal and state law. Almost any institution that receives federal or state dollars is going to have somebody working to ensure NAGPRA, Cal NAGPRA compliance. So long as that there are questions about what physically, materials wise, is in your particular location, as long as you have questions about that, as long as there are materials that could be questioned, there will be a need for somebody in my kind of capacity. And essentially, what my focus is to ensure that our campus or any institution receiving state or federal dollars does not hold any Native American ancestral remains or cultural materials, often broken up into numerous categories, but we have associated funerary objects, sacred objects, objects of cultural patrimony, and unassociated funerary objects. And kind of getting back to what Dr. Ocampo was alluding to, is we've had some changes in the policy and federal law. So we have the federal law NAGPRA, which went into effect in 1990, so over 30 years ago. And then in 2001, we had the California version, CalNAGPRA, come into effect. And just this past November, the CSU as a system, created a NAGPRA policy that all 22, previously 23, but now we've consolidated campuses, 22 CSU campuses must adhere to. And it's create a blanket policy and basically like a blanket template for how NAGPRA and CalNAGPRA should be working at our campus levels to ensure that tribes have an expedited process to go through. One of their complaints being that like all the campuses had different procedures and different operating systems. So now that we have that streamlined, one of the big takeaways from both the new policy, which already is just serves to strengthen both state and federal law, were changes to restrict teaching, research, or exhibition of any potential materials without free and prior informed consent from tribal nations. So in the past, prior to this particular clause being included, there'd be exhibits done with cultural material from tribal nations that may or may not have, engaged in any tribal consultation. They may have just had these materials within their collection space. A curator came around, had a theme. Either that theme might be to show a specific region, or it might be to just show specific types. So you have baskets from, whatever the scope of the collection is of that museum. It may have a lot of baskets all grouped together, and they're showing all the different types of baskets together. But this may not, it almost certainly didn't go through tribal consultation, and there could be lots of issues with, hey, you're commingling cultures here. The information you're displaying is not correct. The types of materials that you're showcasing are not appropriate to be on display. And so when we had the strengthening of the laws, we had the final rule for NAGPRA. We termed it final rule, which went into effect in January of 2024. That strengthened this idea of the restrictions of teaching and exhibition. CalNAGPRA was bolstered by AB 978, which was an assembly bill passed by Assemblyman James Ramos, who is California's only California native assemblyman. And this law really strengthened this idea of restrictions on teaching. A lot of folks see restrictions on teaching and exhibition and research, and they see that as like, whoa, you're trying to like cut out academic curriculum. Well, in reality, it's like the full expanse of that phrase is without free and prior informed consent from tribal nations. Folks from the tribal nations need to be on board. They need to have been informed and have had the opportunity to say yes, at the very least, had the opportunity to say no prior to you doing any of this kind of work. And then and only then should you be moving forward. And it should really be ideally at the tribe's urging where this all comes from, but at the very least, they need to be aware and be giving you that permission in a good timeline. You don't want there to be a timeline of like, hey, we're doing something like in a month, and I need to know right now at this lunch whether or not you say yes. And if you say no, like that's really going to hurt us. But I need you to say yes. Like that's not a good way to conduct that kind of work at all. There should be a big timeline. And that change in the law, where we see like we need to have a really reevaluate our timelines, kind of comes into a direct conflict with museum timelines, which are, typically, as I was saying, didn't necessarily always adhere to tribal consultation timelines, didn't necessarily engage in that work, and kind of functioned on their own timelines of like, hey, we have an idea for an exhibit. We're operating within a 2-year window. In our first window, we're planning. Second window, we're executing, and we pull it off in 2 years. That's our goal. If we need to, we can always crunch our timeline. There rarely was the thought like we need to expand our timeline. That's often seen as like that's a negative. We don't want to do that. We don't want to expand our timeline. Working with tribal nations, especially in light of the new policies and laws, really forces us as museum professionals to take a step back, which, we definitely should be doing anyway, right? We should always be taking a step back, especially when we're showcasing the work or the cultures of that are not our own. Like there should already be a lot of inward looking as soon as we even have that conversation about like, this is a topic we want to do. This is a culture we want to showcase. We need to have conversations about where is that coming from, like, and how are we doing this? And this all needs to be coming in a good way. In museums, if you guys take any classes with Dr. Long or Dr. Ocampo, and you talk about the origins of museums, and we talk about the phrasing cabinets of curiosity, that is like such a degrading idea for indigenous peoples, and not just indigenous peoples here in the United States or North America or South America, but globally. Like this idea of like you're a curiosity that we're gonna kind of just like look at and say like how weird, like how interesting these people, right? Like as though they're from a different planet or they're not human at all. Um, and so those timelines, those have, although museums could be really like moving forward in a lot of socially progressive ways, those timelines are still real remnants of the past and living in this really colonial mindset of like we can do this on the timeline because really it's putting the blinders on of like this is what we can do right in our timeline. It's really doesn't look at it like what is our impact, our greater impact and responsibility beyond that. Um, so I would highly encourage folks here who are like, if you are interested in doing any museum work, if you are interested in putting on exhibits and things of that nature, I would also encourage you not only to just learn about the museum or the institution where you want to be applying, the area in which you want to be working in regionally, but also like the laws and the policies that your institution is going to have to operate under. Whether or not you think like, oh, well, I'm never going to put on any exhibits or do any work with the Native American community. That's not my focus. That may be so, but the museum might have other ideas. And as we've already alluded to, museums are short-staffed. Everybody is putting in at that institution. And when we talk about fit, that's another big part of it. Do you want to be at a place that is like, hey, we're gonna do things the right way? It may not be the speediest way. It may not be financially the easiest way, and it actually might be kind of a frustrating way to do things because we're not in charge. We're not the drivers of this anymore. And sometimes that's really difficult for people to give up, is like being in the driver's seat. So you got to, I would say, do a little inward looking too and just say, like, what is my goal? Is my goal to like have my name on something at the end of the day so I can say, look what I did in this exhibit? Or are you trying to do something bigger and this is the physical manifestation? Like, look what we did here, but look what we're doing here in this community. Look at the folks we've gathered, look at the connections we've made. And that's the bigger thing. Sorry, I know that was a ton, and we didn't even really touch on all the parts of NAGPRA, which will probably be its own part of the series.
That's a good idea, actually. A special session on Negra. I would love that, Michael, and I hope that was you volunteering because I'd love to spotlight spotlight that work and spend a whole these are hours. It's already 40 minutes in. These hours go so fast because we get such a cool group of people here. Um, but thanks, Michael. That was really insightful, and I want to open to Daisy and Jennifer about so a little bit more on best practices, do's and don'ts in getting the foot in the door, the application process, organizations like NACPRA that you should be, or rather, um, uh, rules and guidelines like NACPRA guidelines that you should be tuned into and aware of um, if you're if you're interested in getting into this field. So just another sort of wide open prompt for if you want to jump in on that.
I don't want to cut Daisy off if okay. um, I think that was well said, Michael. I know it's a lot of information, but I work with some smaller museums or historical societies that literally still don't know what NAGPRA is. And because a lot of it, they're volunteer run. And so they're just trying to keep something alive, like a historic site alive. And so they're not, quote, professionals in the field. And so they're learning this for the first time. And to be honest, like, I learned a lot about NAGPRA just, in the field on my job. So I know that, for example, we at my museum and my last museum try really hard to work with the community in everything that we do. My current museum, we've done over 400 repatriations since NAGPRA was passed in 1990, but and having a lot of discussions with Native communities. It's more than just repatriating what was theirs already to begin with, or having a land acknowledgement that a lot of them, through conversations and through conferences and things, feel, it's performative. Like, involve the Native community, put them on your board, put them on advisory committees and things like that. So I know that we are trying to do that with all facets, not just the Native community, but just different communities. We're very diverse here in Riverside, and I know San Bernardino County too. So trying to get representation of different aspects of different communities within your museum. I know a big thing for me is, if somebody walks into a museum, do they see themselves in a community museum? And I think that's different out here than if you go to the Getty. If you're going to the Riverside Museum, if you're going to the San Bernardino County Museum, it's a community museum. And so it should be representative of those people that live in the community. Yes, you're going to an art museum, you're going to see art, but it's a little different when you are the Museum of Riverside, when you are the San Bernardino County Museum. So I feel I put a little bit more weight on myself. I'm not a curator anymore, but when I was a curator, to curate exhibitions that are representative of those people. So a little bit of a tagline. I know specifically when I was a history curator, and I doubled as an archivist because we didn't have one. But here we do have an archivist and a history curator. And so licensing, copyright, all of those are really hard, and they have different laws pertaining to all of them and what falls under which time period. Abandoned property, when you have an unlabeled item in your collection, and it's called found in collections because it doesn't have a number on it, you don't know where it came from. Do you have to keep it for 25 years? Do you have to keep it for 7 years? We don't know. So we're really lucky in my last two institutions to have, this is a city museum. It's a department of the city. My last museum was a county museum. It was a department of the county. Very lucky to have those resources where they have some sort of legal counsel where we can go to those individuals and say, this is the situation. What should we do? A lot of museums don't have that. So you kind of have to figure it out on your own as a curator, as whatever you are, collections manager. So I know those are things that have come up a lot in my experience as a history curator. So not quite NAGPRA, but can we use this image? Will somebody sue us if we use this image? So
Thanks, Jennifer. Daisy, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think one of the things I wanted to, as we all know, networking at all of these levels is super important, whether it's the small NACPRA community of folks or really any museum. So I wanted to put a shout out to a few of things that are just on my radar right now. I'm presenting next week, and it's in Riverside. Um, it is the California Preservation Conference. It's at the Convention Center in Riverside. I'll be leading a tour of Mount Rubidoux, which is Pachapa. It's a Native American sacred site, even though it's our recreational kind of 3 mile loop. I'm gonna do a film screening and a thing there. So if you want to just look up California Preservation Conference, I think there's a 1 day fee. That there's often museums, right, within preservation work as well. I know Michael and I are probably more familiar with ATOM, which is the Association of Tribal Archives, Library, and Museums. And these are expensive spaces. These are professional associations, right? So you're getting a lot of folks that are already in the field, but you should kind of follow these people on social media at the very least. They always have really cool newsletters that you can always subscribe to, and I feel like I've always stayed in the loop of the landscape of museums and preservation and archives. And if they happen to be in your area, like the California preservation conference and you're not paying hotel and you're not doing flying out and you just have to pay your registration fee and buy your lunch, I would have those on your radar of like a thing you do once a year, right? You also have, in addition to like curators and archives, and there's also museum educators, right? The folks that do a lot of you have your exhibit and then you have your K through 12 coming by and have to build curriculum around the exhibit. So you're kind of that continuity to the exhibit and really that outreach and that dynamic person that meets a bunch of kids coming off a yellow bus and are so excited. I know in Pomona they're having a museum educators of Southern California, really cool group, and they're about to have their gathering in Pomona, not far, accessible. You pay your day rate and you're good, right? And these are really great spaces for networking. I also know that our campus archivist at Cal State San Bernardino has the archives internship for the fall. Again, just work with historical material. Um, I've had a couple students go through that program. It's very structured, and at the end, you pretty much have to create a library display of your material to tell the story, right, of your sources. So that display strategies and stuff like that, right? Like that's all part of the work. And so yeah, just kind of wanted to highlight some of these spaces and events and associations that are all part of somewhat local, right? Or to keep on your radar.
That's really
Did
great.
forget to mention, I'm so sorry
Right.
to cut you off. There is CAM, the California Association of Museums. They have a lot of entry level webinars and Their conference was in LA this year, so it's probably going to be up north next year. They tend to flip flop between the state, but they have it online. And then for historians specifically, AASLH, the American Association of State and Local History, but they're national. So their conference can be anywhere, but those are both good resources too.
And I just wanted to say, I was quickly talking via text with my director, and if all students here don't know him, I would encourage you to get to know him. Speaking of folks that know lots of people, not just Dr. Daisy Ocampo and Jennifer, but Panda Armendariz, who he's not a grad of Cal State San Bernardino, but is a CSU grad. He went to Cal Poly, or he worked at Cal Poly and went to UC Riverside. He just let me confirm with me about ATOM if we do have any students who might be interested in going. I know that there is a cost associated with that. Our office, as the Office of Tribal Relations, may be able to assist students with registration costs and cover that for a few of you who might be interested in going. We can always talk about that further, but it is an option. If you are interested in going and you see like, oh man, there's a registration cost associated with this, see what resources are on campus, reach out to maybe departments that might be associated. And really what it is for our purposes here is that, this is for tribal archives, libraries, and museums, often working in close collaboration with, if not already being part of tribal nations who may have their own education departments, through their own tribal historic preservation departments, might have their own archives and libraries. And so, if there's a benefit, try and figure out who that would really work with and reach out to folks here on campus. And even if we directly can't help you, we might be able to put you in touch with somebody who can. So, definitely would not limit yourself, your opportunities or anything like that based on like, oh, there's a cost and I just, can't do that without fully exploring, like, is there somebody who'd be willing to help us out with that? Jennifer said at the very beginning, we've harped on it a few times, this work is niche, which means this is a small, tight community, and we are definitely interested in promoting and our community and watching it grow and helping young students come into the community and not feel overwhelmed by like, wow, there's a lot that like, we learned a lot in class and we can do a lot. We can learn directly from folks who have done this work and continue to do this work. But until you're doing it yourself, until you're immersed in the work, it's really hard to make that connection. So the last thing we'd want for you to do is feel like you got out there and you didn't necessarily have the exact preparation you needed and doubt yourself because I'm sure all of you here are capable of amazing things. So like there's so many amazing things you could all get into. Don't limit yourself, and we're here to support in any way we can.
Thank, thanks all, and thanks Jennifer for correcting me. I was trying to keep up. I was trying to keep up with Daisy and Michael and put the posts in, but I got the wrong one. I did the American Alliance of Museums, but you then sent the correct one there, which was the um, American Association for State and Local History. So I urge folks to follow up with that. And a quick note. Oh, good. Okay, Jennifer. I didn't share anything that wasn't endorsed. Um, but just to Michael's point there, um, the Office of Student Research sometimes has funds for the kind of thing that Michael mentioned. That will be something like a conference fee or even travel for a conference. Um, Also, on a sort of related note, the planning thing is important. Where if you know about something in advance, uh, query the Office of Student Research and find out if they can support a trip or conference. Um, they do a good job of helping students attend these kind of conferences. Sometimes when you're presenting, I think sometimes when you're not presenting, you can still, it can't hurt to ask and find out, through your department, through the Office of Student Research, through student clubs. Sometimes clubs have a kitty of funds that you can ask for support for. So make sure that if you see that there is a fee to attend or to present in a conference, ask your faculty, ask the Office of Student Research, ask student club leaders, and you may find that you can get support to attend these kind of conferences. And also reach out to the conference leaders themselves, the conference organizers themselves, and say, I'm a student at Cal State San Bernardino, and I want to attend this conference. And I have a tendency to be a little presumptuous. Jennifer, Michael, and Daisy know I impose on my colleagues and friends time to do these kind of activities, to do these sort of things. Um, and I think when when I ask folks to get together, we have really really nice events like this. And but you do have to ask. You do have to reach out to your faculty and to the organizers of these kind of things. And you will probably be pleasantly surprised when the sort of shoemaker's elves come out and help you make things happen. So you do have to ask. And I suspect that as a student, even reaching out to conference organizers, even reaching out to museum event planners and those kind of things, they're going to be excited to have somebody as cool as an enthusiastic student. And they may even put you to work. They may even say, "Yeah, come on, you can help with handing out flyers and materials and that kind of thing, and become a part of the event." So ask. Make sure that you ask. Make sure that you make your needs known. Uh, all right, we're nearing the top of the hour. This is, as always, this is such a nice um, opportunity to catch up with friends and colleagues. I'm going to turn it over to our three guest experts for any final words, any parting thoughts as we get ready to wrap up. But thank you so much for making the time to join us and to share your wisdom and your experience and your insights. Um, and your enthusiasm about the field with our students. So thanks Daisy, thanks Michael, thanks Jennifer for joining us, and I'll turn the floor over to you if and there are any notes that you made or thoughts that you had as we were chatting about things that our students might benefit from. Any parting thoughts?
I Yeah, we're here. Office hours are posted on the office. I think that's a more personal time to grab coffee. Come on down. I'm there Tuesday, Thursdays, and Fridays. That's where a lot of that interactive engagement can take place, and networking and just starting, just starting and um yeah, starting. Networking and just reaching out, I think is the most important thing.
Yeah, I would definitely say reach out, get to know your faculty. I've already said it once, but I really believe it. This group of faculty, especially in the history department, are some of the best, not just faculty, but people that you'll ever meet in your life. I graduated high school in 2007, and I didn't get a bachelor's until 2019. So there was a lot of like rocky time in between then. And I'll say like Dr. Murray, I took one class with Dr. Murray, and because our fields in history don't particularly line up for me. I mean, he's not a Native American historian. That's not his specialty, and he's a museum lover, I can tell, but like that's not his focus. Like that's not what he does. And just being able to meet somebody like him really like when I felt like I wasn't sure about what I wanted to be doing with my life. I wasn't sure that school was even the right place for me. He gave me the right words of encouragement. He was there in all the right ways for me as a supportive person, as a faculty member, to just be a faculty member, realizing like I'm a faculty member, you're a student, and my job is to encourage you in the best ways that I can. And he definitely did that. And through that, those few words of encouragement really like put my butt into high gear. And I, got to meet Dr. Ocampo, and I got to really do more work with Dr. Long and get involved in internships. I got to meet lots of other great folks off of campus that were connected with folks and just hear more good words about them. So again, I would really encourage you, yeah, go grab that coffee, go meet with these folks. I'm also here on campus Monday through Friday in administration. So if you ever feel like it, I don't necessarily think that I have half of what these amazing faculty members have to offer. But, if they don't have office hours or they're in class and I'm your fifth choice down, I'm happy to be it. Feel free to swing on by and, can always talk about anything museum related, or maybe even I might be able to help just point you in the right folks or the right direction of some folks who might be interested in meeting with you as well.
I will just like add on to that. Keep your mental door open. I was initially pre-med and finished all my pre-med recs, and actually was a classics major to be more competitive for med school, and wanted to have that edge, and ended up liking classics so much that I was like, forget med school, which was a good decision. I would have failed miserably in med school. And then happened to randomly get a job at this little place called the Mission Inn Foundation and Museum. And what Daisy was saying earlier is not every job is a curator position. And I had a couple positions before I became a curator. And so I know not everybody here wants to work in a museum, but, and I know that this has gravitated more towards museum work, but definitely keep your options open. And there's a lot of positions within a museum that aren't traditional museum work either. My friend is an HVAC tech, and I just sent her a job link to the Getty because they were hiring an HVAC tech. So just think about that. And you don't need to know what you want to do. I was a classics major. My focus in my master's was colonial American history, nothing to do with California. So, just keep that mental door open. And I definitely recommend looking at local historic societies in small places, because that's definitely you're in. Not that you can't go knocking on the Huntington's door, but you can. But the smaller places are kind of easier to get into. So.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thanks for the kind words, Michael, and thanks, Daisy, for joining. Michael, one thing that was very clear when we had that chat, I remember that chat distinctly, was I know this is the kind of student who's going to uh, turn into the kind of advisor and nurturing presence that you are right now. So that was very, very clear. Um, and of course, Professor Ocampo Diaz is such a force for inspiring our students. I'm looking forward to reading Lena's report on the fire kinships exhibit that Michael was also part of. And Jennifer, it's just a delight to have this contact with the Riverside Museum as well. It's so much fun to learn from you all. I hope our students benefited half as much as I did. I will be sharing this out, and I'll also track all these links that we collected here and put them in the along with the video when I share that out so that people have this as a resource in the weeks and months to come. Thank you so much. We are at the top of the hour. I want to let our guests go and say thank you for generously sharing your time. I hope our students benefited from this session. I'm sure they did. Thank you very much, everybody. I'll catch up with you again soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.